Hello, everyone. What's up? I'm Ishan Reddy, and this is Ready Chess. This over here is a channel that's dedicated to providing every chess player from beginners to intermediate to advanced the best analysis possible for the games they played as a way to help them improve their skills and also to learn more new tactics, openings, and all sorts of skills in order to become the best they can be. Now you might be wondering, who am I? Well, for me, I played chess for 3 to 4 years. I started playing in tournaments when I was just before my teenage years, and I'm currently at a US rating of around 1500. And I know there's plenty of people who's also started younger, and they're likely higher than me. But that's okay. We all have different no, we all have different chess capabilities. But over here, this entire stream, my first stream over here, is mostly a demo or an introduction into what my streams are mostly going to be going to look like. And for this, I'm going to be analyzing one game I came across played by two opponents, and then I'll be using this to explain every single move in depth. Now you might be wondering, why can't we just use like WeChess or chess.com to analyze it on our own? Well, you can, but the problem is with that, the engines will provide you the lines that will indicate where you made mistakes, but it doesn't really give you the context as into why the moves are played. And this entire channel over here is dedicated to refine that. And so now I'll share my screen and I'll pull up I'll be pulling up the classroom over here. All right, so over here we're on the chess.com classroom right now, and I like this tool. It's a nice analysis board. I get to save games over here and refine whatever is on here. Okay, so now I'll start by explain. I'll start with the first game that was played, as the game began with the simple moves of e4 and then e5. Now, in total, there are plenty of openings to choose from. Well, for me, I like to start with e4 and e5, but at times there's a number of. But at times, the ones that I do recommend are also the Queen's Gambit, because there are a ton of variations that you can memorize and possibly throw others off balance. But for now, we'll look at e4 and e5 and see what this transpires into. And so here, our opponent white played knight f3, the simple developing move, knight c6, and then bishop b5. Now this over here is what begins the Ruy Lopez Opening. It's one of the most popular openings in all of chess. It's played by almost every grandmaster or master there is. And the reason it's important, because the entire purpose of this Ruy Lopez Opening is to get the center square, or to take control of the center. And what I mean here is, let me demonstrate some of one of the main lines. We have a6, bishop a4, knight over here, castles. Knight takes, rook e1. This is called the Ruy Lopez Open variation, where it's mostly an aggressive counterplay by black in an attempt to try to gain position of the center, which is seen through here by pushing the bishop back, bishop b3, and bringing this d5 pawn out to support this. And then white responds by trying to counterattack with the move d4 to force this in hopes of forcing this pawn to take. That way you can exchange with the knight, saying if they trade, and you have an active queen over here ready to make any other threats, and you have this knight over here that's in a dangerous pin over here, and later on you can get this knight and bishop to actively develop over this region, And black is a little slow in development, except for the knight over here. No, but yes, there are the bishops over here, but but we could say that white is slightly better here, but it's hard to tell based on how the game could transpire. All right, so now going back to over here, this was one of the moves that was played over here. No, which was a6 over here. And over here, a6 over here is called the Morphy defense. And the Morphy defense over here is more of like the common way of responding to this, as this usually transpires to what I just showed you. And so over here, white has to move back over here to bishop a4, and then after that, knight goes to f6, which I just played over here, and then white played to castle. Here, let me show, and then the white castles, because this is in hopes of the knight taking the pawn, and then you slide the rook into rook e1 as a way to push a pin on this knight. That way, if black makes a random move, say like this, then at least you have counterplay. Or sorry, leaves the knight open. And that way, saying if the pawn moves here, that way you can push the knight away to a square over here and attack the center, breaking up the pawn structure and then causing damage. And so over here, it really depends over here based on what you play next. And over here, we see that that black played b5 over here, which is a playable move. It does push the bishop back and does continue. And now the Columbus variation. It's another complex variation that also has a similar goal of white trying to maintain control of the center over here. And so over here, after this, we have black played bishop c5. It's more of a developing move, which is understandable. And then white plays c3 over here. And the reason that c3 is played is because, remember, the entire goal of the Ruy Lopez opening is to get control of the center. And over here, the center square that is most vital in this opening is d4. Over here. Because d4 allows you to control the fifth rank over here from C to F, and rather it pushes black's pieces back and allows you more time and space to develop this bishop over here. That can be a lethal threat, and possibly bring this knight in by swinging it to g3 right here, and possibly launching an attack on the king side. So I like white strategy over here. And then there's d6 by black, the developing move that's to provide support for the center pawn. And here, white plays d4, which is the reason why c3 was even played. It's to get control of the center, which he carried through with that. And over here, he chose to exchange it. I'm not sure that this is the best move, because over here, this pawn over here is an attempt to stop white from dominating the center. That way, it can be a piece that can be traded so that there's only one pawn each on the center square. But instead, he exchanges it, and this allows white to bring in its own pawn. And look at this. It has two perfectly placed pawns in the center, and now it forces the bishop to go back to now b6, bishop b6, and now white has time to support this pawn over here on e4 and wants some threats on certain sides of the board. And here white does attempt to do this with bishop g5. This is kind of the second best move. I would support it by moving to rook e1, trying to maybe push the pawn up and trying to force his knight even back. But at least the bishop over here is developing, and it does push a pin on the queen. And now over here, this I do not really get a castle. I don't, because he actually appears to have missed a tactic, missed some very tricky tactics over here by white. Because look at what white is able to do over here. I don't know if he saw this or not, but we have to move bishop d5. And this is a very important square for this bishop, because look at this pin it does. It forces this knight to be defended because the rook is on the corner being pinned, and this knight cannot take it because there's also another pin going on, which is with the queen. And so now black has to go into more of a defensive mode over here. And this over here is shown by queen e8. Now, I don't know if queen e8 is the best. It's playable, but I would say the bishop should be placed first before going placed on b7, and then you move the queen to d7 as a way to keep this queen on a decent square instead of backed up. And this over here is a huge mistake, because look at what it does to this knight. Because this knight now can be exchanged, and now can create a double pawn structure. And in a chess game, a double pawn structure like this is not good. I mean, it can be beneficial sometimes, but over here, this is extremely dangerous, because look at what it does to this king side. It exposes the entire G file to it. And if this queen gets open over here, it can trap this king in the corner, and then you could have a checkmate on h7, saying if you bring the knight to f6 or g5. So this is not looking good for black at all. And so over here, how did white respond with this opportunity? Well, he played queen c1 over here, which is understandable, because now you're adding more pressure to this pin over here, and you also got the threat of also going to queen h6. Like I said, trying to put pressure on this weakened king side and possibly bringing in the knight to do some damage. And so now black cannot lose this knight, of course, and has to react with bishop d7. And look at this queen over here. Look at how clamped it's getting. Now, look at this. It's limited to basically this square, e7, and the entire back rank. It is not looking good for black whatsoever. And so now we see that as I said, the queen does move to h6 over here. Now putting pressure on the f6 pawn to take it, and possibly bring in this free up space for this knight. And so now the queen has to defend it with e7. But now look at the opening that this queen move does. It allows this rook to slide in here and continue to add two attackers over here. And as this is kind of dead loss for this rook is almost a dead loss for black, unless counterplay is made, which would have, or not necessarily counterplay, but black would have to retreat. But this would once again free up this f6 pawn for the taking, and then the king is about to be checkmated in a few moves. So with this, black has to counterplay over here, which means to attack a piece, which is knight d4, and this is the only good move, because saying if the bishop takes a8, then the knight can go to e2 and force this check over here. The king will move, knight takes bishop, the queen takes the knight, and then the rook takes. And white still has a solid position, but it still looks recoverable. Black can still win this game. And so over here, white doesn't fall for this and instead takes the knight, which is the best move. The bishop takes, and over here, white plays a8, which is understandable because now even if the bishop takes by attacking the two rooks, at least white can develop this knight over here and at least go for an exchange with the bishop and possibly bring this knight into action, maybe swing it around here or so. And so as expected, black takes, knight moves to c3, and the bishop takes a1 and rook takes. And now over here, and then the rook takes a8. Now over here, this is actually a huge blunder. And taking this bishop is the biggest blunder of the game because look at this brilliant move over here. Knight d5. And looking at this move, you might think, oh, it's just attacking the queen. But look, it's attacking this f6 pawn. And remember, this king over here, look at this queen over here. It's taking over these dark squares over here, except the corner, which means that the only move for the king is to go to the corner. Therefore, if white checks over here, the king is forced to move to h8. And from this, the queen can make a checkmate over here. And if the queen moves over here, you still defend it, you still attack, and with this, the king is forced into the corner, and then this is mate. And now, and with that, black can't let that happen, so he'd have to sacrifice the queen, and you just take the queen back in exchange, and you're just up. This is completely winning. I mean, look at the black king. It can't really do anything over here. And with this rook over here, you can bring it to an open file over here and do back rank checkmate or something. And so, yeah, this is basically a lost game for black. And over here, black tries to hope to just pray by the miracle that white doesn't notice what taking the pawn, but it doesn't work because we got this fork over here, and the king has to move, and then the queen is gone. And basically, you're basically up a queen. And in most cases, this is game over. And yeah, that is basically game. So what basically defined this was mostly taking advantage of one weakness as we go back. And it all started with this move, this castle move, because this over here ignored the threat of this bishop over here to d5, placing pressure on this pin and leaving it vulnerable to attacks like queen to c1, and forcing it to defend all the way throughout, while white just simply develops. And yeah, that was mostly what defined the game. And this is an important skill to learn, because whenever you see these type of openings, these opportunities, you have to take it, but you also have to be precise in how you navigate through this, because the entire reason of making this move is to find a reason, and therefore as white calculated by capitalizing on this small move over here, by forcing the exposure of the king side and placing more pressure on the knight and with the queen and also the rook, and forcing the rest to go on. And so yes, this is basically the end of my stream. This is and like I said, this is mostly an introduction as into what my stream is trying to achieve, which is to demonstrate, give a demo of how I'm going to be analyzing these chess games. And the way you can send me these chess games is by going to the comments below, you can send me your chess notations, and I'll hook them up onto Chess Classroom over here, and then I can run it through, and then I'll be able to use the live stream to explain the step-by-step processes of what went right, what went wrong. And so, yeah, that's basically it. And thank you all for listening, tuning in. This is my first video, chess analysis video, but I'm anticipating that there's plenty more to come. And so once again, drop a like and subscribe to the channel. I highly encourage you guys to take a look at my daily videos, as I will be posting more chess games that you can look and possibly use it to motivate you to use the skills that were implied or the mistakes to help you solve any of the problems that you're experiencing while playing. And so, yeah, that's basically it. And I want to thank you for tuning in, and I hope to see you again. Bye.